So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It is my great pleasure to have Dr. V.K. Saraswat, who's presently the member at Niti Aayog of Science and Technology. Thank you for being with us, sir. So the first question I have for you is, so how could the transition to the hydrogen economy in the future benefit India in terms of moving the needle on the self-sufficiency Atmanirbhar mission that we have for India?
I think it is very clear after the announcement made by our Honorable Prime Minister on the 15th August this year that India is poised to start the hydrogen economy mission. And that too, he has called it Green Hydrogen Mission. It's a very important resource of energy, hydrogen, which is produced both naturally and chemically. And also, it's a part of the multifaceted puzzle of clean energy transition. So if you are looking at clean energy, then hydrogen will play a major role. Our Prime Minister's point that we should achieve independence by the 100th year of independence, that is the clean energy we should achieve. And that is a kind of a pledge, energy independence, he called it. So it is necessary that we get into that mode at the earliest. Then next thing I would like to mention that hydrogen will give India a quantum jump in achieving its climate targets. In India, hydrogen is utilized in fertilizers, almost about, if I recall correctly, 2.5 million tons per annum. In refineries, also about 2.5 million tons per annum. And rest of the other activities, about 1 million tons per annum. So in a scenario of something like this, if we have hydrogen coming in this kind of a requirement, and this demand is going to increase over a period of time due to industrialization, and our push for more and more clean energy industrial activity. So we should look for something of a larger size to come up in the near future. So the production of green hydrogen will have a lowest carbon footprint than blue hydrogen only when the grid reaches about 90% carbon-free power generation. Our endeavor has been to jump directly to the green hydrogen. But I would say that directly jumping onto the green hydrogen without blue hydrogen, there will be considerable cost implication as we calculate in today's dimensions. Since India is not producing any large-scale electrolyzers as of now, and if installed, are mostly imported, this will give rise to import syndrome. That is, instead of importing crude, India will end up importing the electrolyzers. And hydrogen storage is the key enabling technology. None of the current technologies satisfies all the hydrogen storage attributes sought by the manufacturers and end users. On this front, government, industry coordination on R&D is needed to lower the cost, improve performance, and develop advanced materials. So local production of hydrogen will significantly reduce the transportation fuel cost while reducing the emissions. It will also explore possibilities in blue and green hydrogen production and storage for heavy-duty transportation of hydrogen used in industrial, steel, refinery, cement, and logistics clusters. So I think this is one transition which we are all looking for. And if we are looking for clean energy, and our energy mix will certainly take hydrogen at the top of the ladder. And earlier we do it, and earlier we do through the processes of ramping up from blue hydrogen to green hydrogen, I think we will be meeting the required objectives.
Thank you very much, sir. I think the energy independence is a very, very important term here, and I do like that. So now if we were to actually start to implement this and go ahead, what do you envisage the role of the private sector in this green hydrogen mission? And in the similar vein, what is the role of research institutions, think tanks, including organizations like ours that can contribute to this national effort?
It's a very good question. And I would like to mention that unlike in the other renewable energy segments like solar energy and others, the hydrogen mission certainly demands a high degree of self-reliance. And for that self-reliance to be achieved, it is important that the industry and academia and the government policies, they work together to provide the necessary impetus. So proactive industry collaboration with government is the key to creating a hydrogen economy in India. This will help bring best-in-class hydrogen technology equipment and know how to create a hydrogen supply chain in India. In many cases, this could be completely made in India profile. So private sector certainly will have a crucial role in the success of green hydrogen mission. As per my view, the private sector should mainly focus on developing the indigenous equipment like electrolyzers, the compressors, the storage devices like the Type 4 cylinders, or even if you go for compressed hydrogen or compressed air, whatever are the methods of doing the storage and transportation and production of hydrogen. I think in each one of them, the participation of the private industry, along with academia and the national laboratories, will be the major requirement. If we can't do that, then we will run into problems of importing the entire thing over and over again. So that's why I'm suggesting that think tanks to work towards idea that in the immediate term and mid-term, we should upscale our investment on blue hydrogen production and spend significant amount on R&D activities to bring down the cost of electrolyzers and evolve efficient storage and transportation equipment and technologies. The industry should work towards production of fuel cells in large quantities in India with the highest indigenous content and robust supply chain. Certain low-hanging fruits are there, like methanol and ammonia reformers. They can be used on heavy-duty trucks to provide hydrogen on board to power the fuel cell, and that should be developed and produced in large quantities to decarbonize the transport sector significantly. I will recommend the following things actually. I will say that the focus should be on research and production, storage, distribution of hydrogen. Then there should be a separate team that should work in a mission mode to produce hydrogen from coal along with carbon capture and utilization. Then you should also set up biomass and agro residue plants for hydrogen production. Develop hydrogen pressure type 1 to type 4 cylinders and compress hydrogen compressors leading to production. Because if you say in the complete life cycle cost, one of the major segment is the storage transportation cost. I'll give you an example. If you have the production cost something like today $5 to $6 per kg of hydrogen, by the time you add the storage cost and the transportation cost, this figure goes to as high as $14 to $15. So it is important that for containing the cost of hydrogen, particularly the green hydrogen, the electrolyzers have to be made cheaper, the fuel cells have to be made cheaper, the storage devices have to be indigenously produced. And then we have to also use the new technologies to be developed like CSP route for SOEC based electrolysis to be developed to get the best advantage in terms of efficiency. We should also evaluate international collaboration in specific areas for leapfrogging in technology gaps and achieving synergy leading to saving on time and cost. So I think we should collaborate, but collaboration doesn't mean that it should license production of the equipment that is being provided by the foreign company. It should be the indigenous manufacturing development with technology tie-ups wherever essential. It is not essential that we have to purchase technology all the time. Indian scientists, engineers, and the industry are capable of doing their, all might to produce these systems indigenously. So hydrogen mission should be a priority of the country and should be funded adequately to achieve economy of scale. Why do you think the China is able to sell these products at a much lower cost? The reason is very simple. The scale at which the Chinese production is being done is nowhere comparable in any other country. And that scale, if we are not able to achieve, we will not be comparable. And hence, self-reliance will be possible only if we carry out a very large-scale production of these items. It should not be riding on the supply of 90% of inputs, like in the case of solar and lithium-ion battery case from foreign sources. We should avoid switching over from crude import to the import of fuel cell, electrolyzers, and high-pressure storage cylinders, hydrogen compressors, and other aggregates. So that is the role industry has to play, that is the role academia has to play, and indigenously design, develop, and produce all these aggregates which are integral part of the hydrogen economy, green hydrogen mission of our Honorable Prime Minister.
So my follow-on question, and you touched upon some of these aspects. As we are moving towards this 450 gigawatts of renewable energy, it is very clear that we will need all types of storage to manage the national grid. What are your views on the type of energy storage that could become the way forward, or what we would call the storage of the future? What are your views on that?
See, there's no doubt. Today, India is one of the largest, almost the world leader in the production of renewable energy. It is unique position to take a lead role in the development of a global hydrogen economy. And hydrogen economy, without making the grid completely decarbonized, will not lead to what we call as the green hydrogen mission completely. As I mentioned earlier, unless the grid is 90% decarbonized, you don't really get the green hydrogen. I will quote some figures which I read the other day in the International Energy magazine, where they were talking that even in 2047, there will be a significant percentage of blue hydrogen and green hydrogen, which will be forming part of the hydrogen cartel. So 47 and 53%, that's right. So it is important for us now to look at what are the devices which will decarbonize the grid. And for decarbonizing the grid, one of the methods which is suggested is that should we not go for as much storage of energy when the peak load is less and the production of the solar and renewables is high. And for that, multiple methods have been projected. Of course, there has been significant push for battery storage, and battery-based storage using lithium-ion battery is fraught with some kind of problems, because while the lithium-ion batteries could be taken away from the mobility segment and used for storage, but even then, unless they are recycled in a big way, the availability of lithium, which is a scarce element in the planet Earth, will become a major problem. So we have to go through our complete life cycle as far as the storage using lithium is concerned. Actually, if you look at it for this, over the last 7 years, India has invested more than $70 billion in renewable energy. This amounts to about 1.89% of the total investment received across all sectors during the same time period. So we have to really look at, there are possibilities that what we should do in this area. For example, we should look for actually the storages which are hydroelectric, pumped hydroelectric storage, compressed air energy storage, sodium sulfur batteries. Other energy storage technologies are lithium-ion batteries, flow batteries, hydrogen generation, and storage in hydrogen-based batteries like lithium molybdenum hydride and nickel iron batteries. And now recently I was also looking at the aluminum air batteries and so on. So there's a tremendous amount of new chemistries which are evolving, which will be lithium free. So that could be one option. But my major take is that in addition to the storage what we are talking today, I think the most economic part would be to increase our base load availability. And that base load availability will come with going for more and more what we call as the nuclear power, which could be integrated with our grid today in such a manner, because that is the one which completely decarbonizes the grid, and then that should be integrated with the renewable power. So that is what I would call as the base load provided. But if you are looking only at storage, these methods which I mentioned could be tried out. Another one is that there are good carriers of hydrogen. Like methanol is a good carrier of hydrogen. Ammonia is a good carrier of hydrogen. So methanol and ammonia reformers can be then planned, which can be actually even on board a commercial truck can be used for reforming methanol into hydrogen, and then hydrogen can be used on the fuel cell to power the vehicle. So that is a kind of approach. In other words, one method of storing hydrogen is to create some of these chemicals like methanol and ammonia, which can act as an input. Then, of course, e-mobility is expanding, and we now see electric cars, bikes, scooters, e-bikes in other areas. These may be joined by more fuel cell vehicles running on hydrogen. Utilization of all these vehicles will be extended beyond their intended use as means of transport to also include energy storage. That will become part of this. So I must say that if you are really looking at future with the storage, and these devices could be tried out in different forms. But as on today, the storage solutions are, the moment you integrate with the renewable energy, are making the available energy cost not as lucrative as we were thinking. For example, the pure solar is about 2 rupees per unit, whereas the moment I put a battery storage along with that, it jumps to almost about 4.5 to 5 rupees a unit. So that becomes almost comparable or even worse than the thermal power which we are creating. And if I now take the route where I can capture the carbon dioxide from the thermal power plants or the steel power plants and make the grid greener by capturing that carbon dioxide and utilizing it for various applications, what we call a CCU, then you will find that that kind of an integration of the base load of thermal power and the renewables can also become one of the solutions. So you have various options. One is storage, another one is integrating base load with carbon capture and utilization to maintain what we call as the grid purity and maintaining the and meeting the climate demands which have been put by COP21 and others. And we want to decarbonize planet Earth.
No, absolutely. A very good overview on the clean energy transition. And as a leader, and you've run a number of big organizations. My last and most important question is, how are we going to deal with the need for acquiring new skill sets? How do we train our skill workforce? What are the programs for upskilling that we will need in order to get our people up and ready for this new economy, if I may use that term?
See, what we are saying is the energy transition. And in this energy transition phase, what we are saying is there is a tremendous amount of challenge which is there in terms of providing the necessary gadgets. For example, if you take e-mobility today, I have to replace a petrol station by a charging infrastructure. If I have to do the charging infrastructure, now the charging infrastructure could also be directly taken power from the grid, which actually does not meet your requirement of completely green. So you might try to put some kind of a solar energy based charging system with some base load being provided by the batteries and so on. So now all this will require training your manpower to handle charging infrastructure. Or if it is a hydrogen based system, then you have to see hydrogen has to be provided, means hydrogen compressor, or if it is a liquefied hydrogen, then de-liquefaction, or if it is a high pressure cylinder hydrogen, then. So variety of new technologies are required to be mastered by the users, by the people who are dispensing these or distributing this output of these technologies to the customers. And that means new skills would be needed. So there is a positive impact that will result in new jobs and opportunities, but will also have some impact which will be due to the fact that those who are today working on petrol pumps and other areas, they will probably be unemployed. But if they are re-skilled, I think we will be able to manage the transition. The challenge for all is to ensure that the transition to a green economy remains people-centered, and just so that no community or worker are left behind or is left burdening an unfair share of the cost of this transition. That should be our motto. Actually, generally what we call is that people drive change. And if we are to successfully transit to a new green energy economy, we must ensure that people are at the center of all we discuss and develop and deliver. Governments, policymakers, and industry must work in cohesion to ensure that the move to clean energy is fair and equitable. For that, upskilling, retaining, and skills enhancement programs will be critical to help dislocated workers find new employment and to enable the industries of the new green energy economy to find qualified employees and deliver the low carbon technologies and solutions required for us. Most parts of the Indian renewable energy sector are still in the early stages of their development, and proportionate to the current low base are growing rapidly. There is a widespread skill gap shortage in both technical and non-technical field in the renewable energy industry today. To fill this gap, I think we should improve training and certification programs which are accessible to workers of varying backgrounds and skill sets in all states. Develop renewable energy training clusters near ongoing renewable energy projects. We should consider mobile training courses and common platforms and technology to achieve consistency in training programs. We should examine industry needs and target skills most difficult to hire for or in training programs. Seek employees in existing traditional fields to provide overlapping skills in order to fill the technology gap quickly. So these are some of the things I would like to cover at this stage.
No, thank you very much, sir. I think you have given us a very nice and comprehensive overview of not just what the position is, and as well as what lies ahead for us. I thank you for your time and your very valuable answers. I hope our researchers take something from this and are able to contribute to this effort in a successful manner. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much.